I wanted to start with the book's genesis, kind of where this came from. You mentioned it a little bit earlier that this whole idea of terrorist infiltration, that terrorists coming over the southern border, is a highly contentious issue. It falls right on the culture war divide. Every time it's mentioned, the partisan knives come out, and very often the result is not pretty. The most recent example of this that probably everybody remembers, maybe a year and a half ago, when President Trump said that Middle Easterners were migrating up to the southern border and that there were terrorists among them and suspected terrorists among them. And what we saw was a tremendous, like an epic pushback on that from the media, fact check after fact check after fact check, where I think the general public was not well served by any of that, because in the end, I think that the general public and lawmakers and people who need to know about this their knowledge didn't advance any at all. The book really, the main purpose of the book is to become a baseline neutral set of facts about the scope of the threat, and especially from the perspective of the Homeland Security enterprise. The book really takes a view of this threat issue through their eyes, as I think has always been missing, not partisan eyes and through their eyes. And for that reason, I'm really grateful to have this panel, because these are people who actually work this threat issue. Okay. Donald Trump was probably not the best ambassador for this issue, just because of what a lightning rod he was. Again, I want this book to be a kind of Webster's dictionary for this narrow threat issue. That's the bottom line. That this is a place where people can start and have a normal discussion of this issue from both sides of the partisan line, at a time that I think the threat may very well be elevated and escalating right now. So let me get to the book's overarching main findings, so general findings for America's Covert Border War. First of all, the notion of terrorist infiltration as this grand boogeyman that's often floated by conservatives or some Republicans is in fact exaggerated too often. I think that there is some of that goes on. 10 ISIS terrorists crossed the border. Oh my God! And proved me wrong. And then from the other side, from the liberal Democrat side, they're underestimating and acknowledging that there actually is some threat here that needs to be, and I don't mean to be cliche about this or trite, but it's actually somewhere in the middle. And I think that the book kind of gets at the middle ground of the threat, minus all the stuff that goes along with this. Okay. A hint as to why we know that there is a threat and that there is something going on at the southern border that is worth talking about and dealing with is the fact that U.S. Homeland Security agencies stood up real programs, real people to confront this threat 15 years ago, and that they have been operating all this time without any significant reportage about it under both Democrats and Republicans, who all have read intelligence that the general public is not privy to, but having read the intelligence have continued to fund these resource programs. The programs that are part of what I call the Covert Border War, they often are secret or law enforcement sensitive, released intelligence, protected classified intelligence. A lot of it is law enforcement protected because of ongoing investigations. That they do address a human traffic that is coming from countries of national security interest. And what I mean by that are, for example, the 11 Iranians who were apprehended at the Arizona border 1 week ago, Monday. Today's Tuesday, and that there are people coming from countries like Iran reaching the southern border on a regular basis from places like Afghanistan and Yemen and Somalia, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Chechnya, Tajikistan, some 35 to 40 different countries that you have significant terrorist activities and presences in, that they're showing up at the border without any identification very often, moving through South America, Latin America, using human smugglers. The book breaks this whole thing down into what I call the near war and the far war. I'll get to the near war first. I describe the near war mainly as like a central element of it is that when people from these countries hit the border, reach the border like the Iranians, then that is like kind of an alarm goes off, a bell dings, and the FBI and maybe other three-letter agencies will go to the detention facility and begin a very enhanced interview process, face-to-face. There are things that happen. Phones, if they have them, get dumped. There are calls might go out to foreign intelligence services. Norman Townsend, I'm hoping we'll talk a little bit more about that because he led a unit in the FBI that did just that for many years on the Texas-Mexico border. That is what's going on. Other agencies that are involved are ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, ICE Intelligence as well, military intelligence groups like Southcom, Northcom. DIA has very often been involved in the near war and the far war, but often the near war. The U.S. Navy has had a hand in this, and the U.S. Coast Guard has had a hand in some of these activities down in Latin America and at the border. Now, Mark mentioned that these are referred to as special interest aliens. That's government jargon. My book is filled with references to special interest aliens, and I'm going to just mention this now that as of last week, the word alien is no longer in vogue, and they have officially changed from special interest alien to special interest undocumented non-citizen. So they've added a few extra letters, alphabet letters to the, but for purposes of this conversation in the book, we're calling them special interest aliens just because of habit. The Iranians that I talked to, very likely what's been happening, I don't know this, I haven't talked to anybody, but from the reporting in the book, what's probably happening there is for the last week, the FBI and at least ICE office, or their intelligence officers are interviewing and interrogating and doing the investigation that I talk about in the book, that Norman will talk about as well, to just determine that they're not spies from Iran, that they're not maybe an operative. Right now, things are sensitive because the Iranians have promised retaliation for the assassination of Al-Quds General Soleimani. That's in the back of people's minds. The likelihood that these are bad guys is probably fairly low, but these are people, are Homeland Security people who occupy the near war have to at least rule that out. And also, it could be that maybe one or two of them are abdicators from the military or from some kind of, administrative, department in the government there that might be useful to the United States. So the near war is very active right now on these 11 Iranians, as well as many other special interest aliens or special interest undocumented non-citizens. Okay, the far war. This happens in Mexico and Latin America, South America, Central America. This is a part of a what I describe as a layered defense, where our people, especially HSI, occupies the very tip of that spear. They are deployed throughout Latin America. I think the American public would be very surprised to know what they're doing down there. They units in a variety of the countries, allied countries down there, and they are hunting SIA smugglers, who are very unique kind of breed of smugglers, very wily, very difficult to get your hands on. And our HSI investigators are working throughout Latin America, hunting them down, very often successfully hunting them down. But obviously, like a few months ago, HSI and the Brazilians took out an Iranian human smuggling organization. And obviously, we have more Iranians hit the border. So something still is going on down there. They need to probably finish up whatever they're doing. And the other part, James Dinkins will talk a little bit more about what HSI, what he knows about this counterterrorism operation, and it's been going on for years and years. And then in addition to that, the Homeland Security enterprise has set up what I refer to as like a tripwires among our allied governments down there to be able to detect and track down, before they get to the United States, suspected jihadists, guys, women, men, terror watch. That is something that Eddie Dolan, I think, will be able to discuss. And I also want to say that the book concludes primarily as one of its big conclusions that these cordons and programs are responsible for the lack of terror attack from the southern border, in my opinion. And I think I'm not the only one who shares that. And I think that's an unheralded victory for us that we should know about. And I would mention also that the numbers are relatively small of these jihadists. They're not large numbers rushing over the border, but small numbers have very big consequences. We saw that in Europe. We saw that in the last migration crisis, mass migration, that ISIS sent at least several dozen of its operatives into the European theater, where they conducted the Paris attacks and the Brussels attack, and have created catastrophe from one end of that continent to another that have continued to this day. And I don't see any end in sight to it, because they snuck in over the borders. It is a proof of concept there. Very small numbers compared to the total numbers that went in, and that they use this mass migration as camouflage, which brings us to the present. My issue with where we are today is twofold. One is that I believe that we are at the front end of another mass migration crisis on our southern border. This collapses our border control systems, and the covert border war that I talk about in the book gets compromised when all systems collapse and we're unable and incapable of maintaining the kind of actions and investigations and intelligence collection. I see that as happening at a very bad time right now. There are holes in the cordon. The border war is not perfect. And finally, I just want to note that this really is fundamentally a nonpartisan issue. Democrats have been interested in maintaining these programs. The most recent example of this would be under the Barack Obama administration. Jay Johnson, who was Secretary of DHS, in his final months, pushed a very significant rehabilitation and evaluation of the covert border war. He called it a plan to revamp everything that we're doing and get all the agencies in a collaborative and make sure they have everything that they need. That program never happened because the Trump administration came in. The number one recommendation in my book is in chapter 9, which is filled with recommendations, is to have Jay Johnson and his plan brought back. And I hope the Biden administration is listening to this, that he had a good program. He was a Democrat, and he was concerned about this issue.